is something that's that every company really can use straight away.
Yeah, so I go even further than, so alt text, I suppose, is part of a larger conversation that companies need to be having around inclusive and accessible communications. And that goes for everything, every way that we communicate. So like our websites, particularly when we're talking about hiring, the website for a lot of organizations is really the front door to your organization. It's kind of it's the moment where people decide they're either welcome or they're not.
Yeah,
And
the
they will
first
make a
impression.
decision.
Yeah,
Yeah, they will
yeah,
make a
sure.
decision there and then on whether or not they're going to apply when they look at that. So the
Hmm.
accessibility of the website, things like the color contrast that we're using on our websites, that can be very jarring for people who are neurodivergent. If it's not, as you mentioned, alt text, if we're not using alt text in our websites in terms of our imagery. So when we hear alt text, I'm taking for granted that people know what this is. So alt text is alternative
Yeah,
text. And the point of it is to describe an image that otherwise an individual may not be able to access. So for example, if I was to put something on the Employers for Change website, if I was to share something on LinkedIn, maybe I use the image from today to promote it, I would say, navy rectangular box with text, white text at the top saying, and I'd include that, and then I'd say profile images of Barry Prost, Niall McGill, Noreen Murphy, and Christabel Feeney, right? It's to give context. It doesn't have to go into every single detail,
yeah,
but it should give context. But a couple of other things that recruiters should be engaged with are like when they're sending out their documents, right? A lot of recruiters will send out a preparatory document to people for the interview. So is the document accessible? Are you using 12-point text? I would always suggest people either use Arial or Calibri. Personally, I prefer Arial. When you're doing presentations, don't put lots of black text on a white background. That's actually exceptionally disorientating for people who have dyslexia. And then a couple of other things like using the captions, like there's captions available today on this for anybody who'd like to utilize it. That can be very important, particularly in the interview process. We all grew up being told that it's really important to make eye contact. We all had the painful experience in school of having to sit down for 30 minutes and pretend to be doing an interview and have a strong handshake and stare at them into the eye, because that's the only way they'll know you're going to be good at the job.
yeah,
Hopefully we've moved past that. For people who are neurodivergent, that may not be possible. And even being on this today, like for people, it can actually be very jarring for a neurodivergent person to see themselves. Like if you've ADHD, it's very distracting. So even having the captions for the person to kind of catch up and to process those questions. And just one other thing I wanted to add to what Noreen said there, because I think it's something we all do. When you're in an interview, or even if you're doing the preliminary interview as a recruiter for a client, please do not ask people double-barrel questions. It is really difficult to process. Everybody does it, and it's so hard. It's so hard for neurotypical people. It's way harder for neurodivergent people. So clarity on the questions, short, concise, to the point. Focus on the core requirements of the role and nothing else. And you would actually really be much more inclusive than a lot of other people out there doing that job.